So, so we're very honored to have Coach Orner with us today from Charlotte University. She's going to talk to us a little bit about recruiting, try to get us motivated, give us some tips. And so I'm just going to turn it over here to her right now, let her kind of tell us her background and just anything that she can provide for us would be awesome. So, Coach Orner, we'll give you the floor.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. Yeah, guys, this is I'm excited to be here. I'm really passionate about recruiting. I've been a recruiting coordinator now for this will be year 9. And I think one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about it is I kind of a little bit of background. I grew up in a really small Pennsylvania town. And so I'm originally from like right outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania volleyball was not huge. Back in the day, it was just Penn State, and they were winning back-to-back-to-back championships, but no one in the actual state, if you look at some of their rosters, there really wasn't a lot of Pennsylvania kids on it. And so I actually played for a club called Revolution that just started my year. Mike Shaw, who is the head coach at UNC now, he started that program. So one of the things that he's really helped me with, and he's one of my mentors, but I'm just really passionate about just kind of being like this underdog. And, I was a DS. If you can't, I mean, you can't talk, so I'm sitting, but I'm a solid 5'3". And liberos are like a dime in a dozen, unfortunately. And so it's all about how are we putting ourselves out there and how are we putting ourselves in the best light to not only get our name out there, but finding the right school and the right fit. And so I was really fortunate that, again, it was kind of just this DS. I got out of Pennsylvania and I got an opportunity to go play Division 1 in Florida. And then after my freshman year, I transferred to Coastal Carolina University and had a great experience there. But I think I'm really passionate about what I do because I love to see those kids just find the best place for them. And one of the things I realized in Pennsylvania growing up was I always thought Division 1 volleyball or college athletics was only like what Penn State looked like. Like that's what I thought. And that's what I kind of thought everything was. And so if you weren't getting recruited by, X, Y, and Z, that like, hey, there's probably not a place for me. And that's just not the case. Um, I think there's so many opportunities out there that if you want to play and you're willing to do the work, there's a place for you, whether that's NAIA, JUCO, D3, D2, D1. There's just so many opportunities right now. And I think sometimes we get so focused on all that we know versus opening up our options and really getting a feel for what else is out there. Like I never in a million years thought my freshman year I was going to go to Florida. Absolutely not. But and I always wanted like the big school experience and all these things, and I ended up going to a school that I absolutely loved. I transferred because of a coaching change, but I did love my experience, and I also ex love my experience at Coastal Carolina as well. So um, really passionate about people finding their place. And so that's a little bit about me. I played at Coastal Carolina. That's actually where I met our current head coach, Benavia Jenkins. She was the assistant there. I was director of ops. And so we won a championship. I won one as a student athlete. So that was awesome my senior year. Went on staff. She came on. We went undefeated in conference, worked together. She went on to go to a couple different schools, and then Gio was our other associate head coach, and Gio and Benavia worked together at East Tennessee State. They won a couple championships together, and now we're all here. So it's kind of a cool staff where we get to really, I think we've all developed so much in our own ways, but we've all won together as well in different capacities. So that's just why we're really excited about this opportunity here. And we get to rebuild this program right now, and there's so much here that's available and such great opportunities. It was like a no-brainer for all of us. But I think, right now we are recruiting 3 different recruiting classes. We're recruiting for the incoming fall, recruiting for 2026 still, and then obviously 2027s whenever they come up in June 15th. So when I look at recruiting now, like it really has changed a ton even in the last couple years, but a couple things. I'll speak to the Division 1 side of it a little bit. Right now, there's all these different rules with NCAA's coming in of like our recruiting calendar. So like right now, Tommy and I were talking about the reason why we couldn't do some of like this on-person stuff with the players right now is because actually from Mondays through Thursdays in March, we aren't allowed to have off-campus contacts with anyone. They can only be on-campus visits. And technically, since this is like a face-to-face thing, they would have counted that as an in-person contact. Um, so that's been new. That's never been a thing since I've been coaching. So that kind of threw a wrench into some things. And then quiet periods versus dead periods versus full contact periods, right? A contact period is whenever we're allowed to go off campus as staff, that we're able to watch and recruit. Some staff still do old school, like house visits. You can do those whenever you're in contact period. Um, but that's kind of where we do most of our recruiting. Our time is in for club. And then we have quiet periods, which means we can have people come on campus and come to us and visit us, but we are not allowed to go off campus. And then you have dead periods, and volleyball does not have a ton of dead periods, but they just had one for us. We have 2 weeks in December, so we can actually spend time with our families because before it was quiet periods that we were recruiting like on Christmas Eve. We had people on campus and with the transfer portal and all these things. So they kind of helped us a little bit and put a dead period there, and then 4 days for signing period is a dead period. So that's kind of the recruiting calendar for Division One. Um, the other things that have just changed crazier, like I know the transfer portal is like an evil word right now, especially in the club world, and I get that. Um, for some programs, it's an evil word for us too. But I think that there's the portal is interesting right now. It's going through a lot of change as well, is because obviously we just got out of the fifth year COVID kids that had 5 years of eligibility. So that was a big part of like kids that were staying for 3 to 4 years, getting their degree, their undergrad degree, and then wanting to go somewhere else just for a different experience. Um, and so now that the fifth years are over with, there's now different new legislation coming into play that, starting in April, I believe, um, there's going to be roster limits now. So we're going to be cut to 18 kids. And so there are a lot of programs right now that if they have more than 18, whether they're walk-ons or not, you can only have 18 kids. And so a lot of kids in the portal will probably be going in May just because there's not as many spots for programs now. They're going to be capped at 18. Different schools can provide different scholarship opportunities. Some schools are not going to be capped at 18. Um, Long story short, it's a thing called revenue sharing, and the school as a whole can opt in. It's the whole university, it's not just our sport. And so basically, if you have opted into revenue sharing, that means that you're going to be getting revenue in and you can divide and conquer kind of like a percentage now. So in other sports like soccer and baseball, who have always acted on percentages for scholarships, that's what we will now be acting on if your school as a whole has opted into what is called revenue sharing. There are schools like apparently like Northern Colorado, I believe. There are others. I just know that off the top of my head. I believe that they are not opting in as a university for revenue sharing, so they can still have as many as they want on their roster, but they will still stick to a certain amount of scholarships. They can't just go out and scholarship 24, 25 kids. So it's a lot of rule changes. I will tell you guys that we don't even know the answers yet. NCAA hasn't come out and like told us definitively what things are going to look like. A lot of ADs and a lot of administration are still trying to figure out what that looks like financially. Um, so we are doing our best of trying to see what exactly it looks like. But um, so what does that mean for the high school kids? Well, it means that you guys really have to make sure that you are putting your best foot forward and being really organized from the get-go. Um, certain things that I would really encourage are making sure like your emails are going out often, and being up to date. So how can I, as a recruiting coordinator, when I'm going through my emails, like what are things that are sticking out? So let's talk about like emails, okay? Like how do we make a good email? Um, I would suggest you make sure you put your name, like your name that it would be in University Athlete. There's sometimes people put nicknames of what they go by or their middle name or all these things, and like I can't find them. Can't find them when I Google them. I can't find them on their Instagram. So make sure that you're actually putting your name of what everything else is you're known as under. If you are, a hitter of some sort, I would put your approach touch. And if you don't know your approach touch, I would definitely make sure that that's something that you guys as a club are doing like maybe once a month. I think kids that are around the 14 to 16 to 17 age group, their verticals can really go up consistently. And so if you're keeping up with that, that's a really big deal. There are some programs that will straight up say, I can't take a kid that's touching less than, X, Y, and Z. So sometimes, kids, there'll of course always be some caveats to that. If you have a kid that can put a hole through the floor from how strong their arm is, they're still going to get looks. But I think a lot of these physical attributes like your height, your speed, especially speed for liberos, or even middles like your lateral speed, your vertical touch are going to help kind of already naturally put you into a certain category of schools that you should be interested in looking. So like for example, for us right now, our starting outside hitter, she touches 10.5 and a half. Which is insane. That's really high. That's very high. But um, you got to kind of look at conference by conference as well, maybe not just by the school, but like what is the conference as a whole looking at? And so for us, we really want our pins to be touching around like 9, 10 to 10 feet when they're coming in as freshmen. But they also have to have really great arms. If your arm isn't solid, it's really hard to change an arm. So that's where you guys come in as coaches because you guys got to make sure that they're everything from the ground up is working before they get to us. But like the technical stuff is really hard to break once they're 18, 19 as their freshmen. A lot of times, a lot of coaches, like if the arm is an issue, if the technique isn't there, some coaches have a hard time taking a risk on that kid. Um, so the technical foundation needs to be pretty set. But yeah, so like our pins, again, like I said, 9, 10 to 10 feet is freshmen coming in. If they're touching higher, that's awesome. But around 9, 10, you're going to consistently be able to compete in our conference on the pins. Um, Middles, we want minimum at 10 too. And so again, like I said, that's not just us coming up with that number. It's really about what have we seen success in, personally in our different exposures, but also just what we're seeing in conference. Um, and so liberos just got to be able to pass, man. I think that's the one biggest thing. People want to show all these defensive plays all the time when I'm getting these emails. I'm like, that's awesome. Obviously, we have to dig balls, but I need someone that can keep us in system. And so I think putting a lot more emphasis on passing um, is one of the biggest things that I really look for whenever we're sending out, like whenever I'm getting like pass or defensive, DS libero emails. Um, what else? I think those are the main things on the emails is just make sure that you're sticking out in some way, shape, or form. I hate with a passion when I get generalized emails of like these mass emails, and you just know, like if you say, "Hey, coach," and you're not putting, "Hey, coach Jenna," or like you can just tell. Like I always tell people that in high school, my mom coaches high school and club, so I've loved to kind of just help give more information when I can, but um, try and personalize it somehow. Like, hey, I saw your record last year, or maybe you do some information on the coach. Like, doesn't you're not doing a research project, but like a couple little personal things make
Yeah.
me realize, like, oh, this kid is actually serious about us. I'm gonna take a little bit more time versus a mass email where I'm like, they don't really actually want to be at Charlotte. They're just trying to get a bite somewhere. So that's really important. But those are emails.
Well,
Um,
speaking of emails, we had a question like if you email a coach and you don't hear anything, should you just assume that it's a no-go or email back later
that's
on?
such a good question. Keep emailing.
Okay.
Um, Here's my thing. I tell people this. I don't think they realize it. So like right now, we're in recruiting season. We're in um like qualifier season, right? Like all these teams are going to try and qualify for nationals. Um, I'm getting anywhere from like 60 to 80 emails a day. every single day. And then whenever we're in nationals, we're about um, probably around 100 at least, just because people are trying to update you with the schedules and all that stuff. So you need some? You good? Oh, you want to come say hi? Oh, just everyone. I'm just kidding. It's just the guys. This is Benavia. Hi. This is our
Hey.
head coach.
Oh, hey.
As we're talking about recruiting things. There you go. See, oh, also handwritten letters, great thing. Send them out. Have your kids send them out. Thanks, Jen. You're welcome.
So you would recommend the kids send handwritten letters to,
I think it's nice. We've gotten a couple, and I tag them for sure because I think that's awesome. We also do the same. I think showing a handwritten letter is extra effort. Um, and I think we do the same of like that's what we're trying to show kids. I think that's also like a big show of relationships for us. Like I want to know this kid. I want to know what they're about. And I want them to know that we care and vice versa. So sometimes if you can do something a little above and beyond, it goes a
yeah.
lot further of a way than what you think. So
Are
yeah.
most of the people emailing you, or are they emailing the head coach, or are they copying both of you, or how's it?
Um, I have recruiting coordinator on my roster, so I think a lot of kids mostly
Okay.
email me. B knows that like she'll look at emails, but a lot of the times like as the recruiting coordinator, it's my job to kind of go through things. So
Okay.
I always tell people I think it's really safe to always email the head coach, address it to the head coach. It's the respectful thing to do, but then also CC all the assistants. And maybe if it's a certain program, maybe a director of ops, because sometimes there are people that are kind of doing the sorting. So basically what happens with us a lot is we'll all get the emails, but I'm the one that kind of sorts through it. Like I do the evaluations of most of them. I will send Geo the setters. I give Geo all the setters. I'm just like I like recruiting setters, but that's his thing, and I send him on. Um, and then I'll kind of sort through the other ones. And so like if they're kids that we really need to be watching, I will forward on to all of us so we can kind of each do an evaluation, and then we put it into university athlete so we can kind of each have our evals and see what everyone thinks for each other. Um, but yeah, I always say send it to the head coach, but I mean they have a million different things going on.
Yeah.
So, and they're usually not the ones actually evaluating. So make sure you're CCing the coaches, the assistant coaches for sure.
You've mentioned university athlete a couple times.
Mhm.
Is that where all the coaches are hanging out? Like I know there's other services like FieldLevel, maybe prep volleyball or something like that. Is that like if you had to recommend like for your own daughter to sign up for one service, would that be the one?
So I'm not quite sure how it works on y'all's end because this is actually a question for you too. So when we're out recruiting and you see all these coaches with their heads down on their phones like this, and it looks like we're not paying attention, like it looks like we're like on our phone doing something else. So we're actually like that's the service that we have that kind of shows like when I'm in a tournament and I have kids tagged, okay, like go see this person, Gio's going to see this kid, B is going to see this kid. It's in university athletes. So every tournament that they have, most tournaments in the country, university athlete for our coaches, we're able to go in. We purchase what's called a PDF. It links, it syncs to our phone. And per how we organize things, every kid in the country should realistically be a university athlete. So it's not necessarily that it has their videos. Sometimes you can upload your videos, I believe, but you really want to make sure either a lot of times the clubs will purchase it and then just add it in themselves. I don't know how you guys do it. Um, it's not usually an individual thing. That's just how we track players. That's how we track kids when we're at a tournament. And they'll say, okay, they're on court 46 at 8, 10, and 11. So um, I wouldn't say that's really a recruiting tool, though. That's more for us to track you and keep our notes in there.
So it's not something where they're actually using it to communicate with you. It's just something you're using to get their name and what tournament they're at.
Right. Um, I'll be really honest with you guys. Save your money and don't use a recruiting service.
Okay.
Um, I think there are some people that have genuine good intentions. Like this is not me like bashing recruiting services. I do think that they're really genuinely trying. And I think for maybe clubs or maybe kids that can't afford club that they are trying to get their name out there, I can definitely see why you would want to and what's appealing to that. And there are some that have really great connections. Um, but I'm telling you, most of the time it's by either like I'm out and I'm watching, or it's because I got an email, I evaluated a kid and I'm tagging. So I think you can kind of save your money on that. And I think the other way for you guys as coaches is like if I get a call or an email from a coach, this is me personally. Again, not to bash other programs. I don't think a lot of other programs, sometimes they'll have just programs that literally will just delete emails because they're like, I'm just going to go find the kids that help me. I don't believe in that. I think if a kid is putting in the effort and the time, I'm going to put in the effort and the time. That's just what I believe. But when I get an email from a recruiting coordinator or a coach or a high school coach in honor of a kid, it's like 10 extra brownie points because that person took time out of their day to vouch for this kid. And that means to me that they really want it. Obviously, that they're going to have like a good recommendation from that coach, that they're doing the things that the kid is doing the things that I would probably want to be a part if this coach is calling for them.
Right.
So I think too, like if you guys always send emails out as well in honor, for those kids, it goes a long way as well.
That's good. That's good.
Mhm.
You mentioned about the tournaments. Are there certain tournaments that you would say that we as a club need to participate in for our older kids to get seen? Like, I know it's getting a little bit late, but we're all going to be at Big South. We were at
Mhm.
SEQ. We were at the Beach of the Southeast. I mean, are those the ones
Yeah,
you're
I think those are
recommending?
great. I think those are great. I think there's a couple questions that you want to ask, like either your teams or yourself as a staff is like where do my kids want to be? Like what schools are they really interested in? So like in the South, what I've noticed, a lot of kids don't want to go north. I wouldn't either. I was from the north and wanted to go south.
Yeah,
So being in tournaments where they're interested in to be. So like if a lot of them have interest in Florida, maybe you take 1 to 2 trips to Florida. Now that can be a bigger tournament, smaller tournament, up to you guys. But like those types of things, and I think that's a good conversation between the players and parents of one, are these places that I can actually be seen? Because in Florida, man, you got every type of school. You got JUCO, NAIA, D3, D2, D1, high level programs at all points that schools will be there. Um, I don't think you have to go to a qualifier all the time, but the more I'm seeing things, the more I realize that I think you should be in at least 2 to 3 qualifiers a year. I know they're more expensive. It's not about necessarily qualifying for nationals. I think it's more about those are where most of the coaches go because you get more bang for your buck for us. I go to a qualifier like Big South, for instance. Okay. I actually started organizing a little bit today for Big South. Gio and I will be there. And it's not just the teams in the South. Like I know that whenever I go to Big South, I know I'm going to get teams from Michigan that are going to come down. You got a couple Texas schools that are coming. I can get a lot of evaluations of a lot of different programs in that evaluation versus maybe just going to a power league.
right.
Does that make sense? Where there's
Yeah.
only like 8 teams there versus, we still have budgets. You think Division 1 that you're like rolling in dough? Not always the case. We have a good we have a great budget, but we can't just, we're not just spending exorbitant amount of money to go travel. So we got to be really conscious of is where I'm going getting enough bang for my buck of am I going to see enough kids for it to be worth, spending $1,500 to make the trip out for us. So qualifiers again, not always just about saying like, hey, we qualified for nationals. It's about are we in the right place to see enough coaches that are really going to get all different levels of where these kids want to be?
So how much weight do you place on like the club volleyball versus like high school volleyball?
Both.
Both.
Um, Here's my thing. I'm really big, personally. I'm really big on, I want people that understand winning. I think if you can win at one level, you're motivated to win at the next, period. Are you winning in high school? That means a lot to me. because that means that you have a tradition, a culture, you know what it means to put in the time and put in the work to achieve something. You know what winning at the next level feels like, or teamness, that feeling. And a lot of people, once you've had it before, you really, really thrive to want to be in that again. If you are on teams that are just losing all the time, what I've personally seen are just players that aren't that motivated. I would rather have to calm someone down than try and spark someone.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to win, and again, it can be at any level. You could be a winner. We recruited at my old school, we recruited a kid that was a three-time state champion in softball. She didn't even know she wanted to play volleyball. She came to a team camp. We loved her. We offered her. She was a super competitive kid. She had never won anything in volleyball, ever. Their team was not that good for high school volleyball, but she was an exceptional athlete who knew how to win, and that transferred over. And so for me, I put a lot of value in winning. Again, don't care what it's in. Are you competitive? Are you driven? I would personally rather someone that hates to lose versus likes to win. And I think those are two different things. If we're excited about winning all the time, we're just like, woo, those losses don't keep you up enough to really like fire you up a little bit. It doesn't mean we don't, it definitely does not mean that we don't appreciate a good win. We will take that in.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to, I don't like, I want kids that are driven to just keep going and keep going. And sometimes when we're only excited about the wins, um, we forget that there's more to do, that we have more to accomplish.
I know exactly what you're saying. What about I had a question about how important is like a college camp and what if I
Mm.
go to a camp, what's the best way for me to stand out?
Well, first of all, I think it's really important to go to camps that you're actually interested in, or they're actually interested in you. Um, there are so many, I have to be careful of how I say things, so that's why I pause just for the record. So many programs out there are going to do mass camp send outs. And they'll still say elite camp. Like they will make you feel like you are important because they want you to come. I think we can all understand why they want you to come.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important that like if you get one of those invitations, whether that's an email, a text, whatever, you should do a follow-up email or have your players, like I would encourage your players to talk to you guys and be like, hey, these are the camp invitations that I've received. Would you be willing to reach out and see if they're actually serious about me or if this was a just like a general email blast? Um, these camps are expensive. We know that. I think we're pretty level-headed and understanding like families spend so much money on club every year. They spend so much money on just life is expensive right now. So you want to go to places that you're genuinely like your players are interested in and they are interested in them. So they can see if that's a good connection there, if they're playing at that level, if they're going to be contributors at that level, that that's a good fit. I think sometimes kids get really excited whenever they get a big time email. Um, and I hate to burst their bubble. It's not always the case, but sometimes you just need to be like, hey, have they reached out before? Have you heard any interest? Is this a school? And is this a school that they can actually play at? And
Right.
I think helping them navigate that is hard as a conversation because you don't ever want to crush someone's dreams, but you also want to save them in the long run of not investing so much and having these big ideas if the coaching staff isn't that serious about them. So I think if they're really excited and they've never heard anything or received anything prior, like we do questionnaires a lot to kids that we're interested in. Um, Freshmen and sophomores, we're not allowed to send questionnaires anymore. That's a new rule. It used to be before last year, you could send questionnaires to anyone at any age. We weren't allowed to contact them or respond to them in emails, but we could just send out questionnaires. And so I was doing that pretty heavily. Now that's not a thing that we're allowed to do, so we are allowed to send camp invitations. But again, especially I think for your freshmen and sophomores, if they're really serious about looking into camps, um, I would maybe have one of you guys send an email or give them a call and just be like, hey, what's our level of interest here? Just so I can help them navigate their process of deciding like what camps to go to this year. Because I don't know too many families that can even afford 6 elite camps, let alone how many some kids get.
Yeah. And then how if they do go to the camp, how would you recommend they stand out at that camp, or you know what would be a good way for the coach
Yeah,
to remember them?
I think always going up and introducing yourself before camp starts. Don't wait till after. I think sometimes kids get really, really nervous. I've had kids. This is bad. This sounds bad, but I've had kids who we 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 hadn't reached out to them, but they were very interested in us. And I'd have them, they'd come to camp. I didn't really know who they were. Obviously, we're evaluating and interacting with every kid. But then at the end, they would come up to me and say, my name's so and so. I love UNC Charlotte. Like, really just wanted to let you know. And I just spent 2 days maybe not paying as much attention because I didn't know how interested they were. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah,
Or getting that opportunity to talk to them because at camps, that's when you can talk. We can't
mhm,
talk any other time, especially freshmen and sophomores. But like go up and introduce yourself ahead of time so I can like really gauge on giving and also giving you a fair evaluation. Like if you're gonna ask me, I love when kids say, can you give me some feedback? What were your thoughts? What are some things that I can do better? Um, And then I can give like fair evaluation of like, hey, like, yeah, we would absolutely love to continue watching you, getting to know you, or hey, love that you came out. I just don't know if this is the best fit for you because we want to be respectful of everyone's time on both ends. But also, if you're in it, let's spend that time. Like, if this is a good fit on both ends, like, I want to get to know you as a person. I don't want to get to know you just as an athlete. So let's really take those 2 days and make them count.
I got a question from a girl that said she'd be finishing her ninth grade year this year,
Mm.
and she's wondering what she should be doing this summer and next school year to start the recruiting process. So she'll be a 10th grader this fall.
Yeah, I probably get my most amount of emails from players that are in their sophomore year because June 15th is when we're allowed to start talking to rising juniors as Division 1 players or Division 1 coaches. I can honestly tell you I think Division 2 can talk earlier. I don't know those rules because I don't want to misspeak. But for us, we're able to, once June 15th happens, we're able to reach out, start conversations, start relationships of June 15th going into your junior year. So if I'm receiving emails and I'm getting updates, I'm able to evaluate your sophomore year. It's going to give me a better idea to know exactly where you fall, maybe on our list of, top tier, keep our eyes on all those things and get a good evaluation. So I think probably your sophomore year is the year to really push for it, even though understand just because you're sending emails, we can't respond back. We
Okay.
can't send you questionnaires. So sometimes it feels like, what am I doing this for? Trust me, it's going a long way. It actually is. We're just not legally allowed to respond back. But I do think sophomore year is probably the year that you need to start getting everything organized. Everything really, the ball gets rolling your junior year. But you want to start putting out those emails so we know to track and we can still evaluate and go watch you. We just can't talk to you.
Okay. And then maybe on the opposite end, what if you're going to be a senior and you hadn't really, for whatever reason, you haven't really dove into recruiting like maybe you should have, but you think you can play at the next level? What what should they be doing like today?
Well, let me preface this by I did not commit until my senior year. First of all, I didn't start playing volleyball until my freshman year of high school, and Benavia did not either. I always like to brag on Benavia when I can because she doesn't do a good job of bragging about herself. She's super humble. Benavia was a two-time All-American middle blocker at Florida,
Oh wow.
University of Florida. In her career, she went 72-0. She went undefeated in the SEC. And she's a boss in everything she does. She's one of my best friends, so I also love to brag, like I said, brag on her all the time, and it's my job to brag on her. I'm a recruiting coordinator, but she also did not start until her freshman year of high school. So when I tell you like this underdog story, she was a track runner, and Mary Wise at the time went and saw her and was like, I can train that. And I think she verbally committed late because back in the day you could verbal at any time. She committed, I don't quote me on when she committed, I just know it was late. So we both started late, we both verbaled late. Um, everyone's timeline is their own. It is always their own. They shouldn't feel pressured to do so. Um, I had a great experience. I was still able to play Division One. I still won championships at the Division One level. Like, and I say that humbly, not because I'm bragging, but because there's, like I said, there's a place for everyone and everyone's timing is their own. Um, I would ask myself though that if you weren't motivated by it beforehand, it's not that I didn't start with the recruiting process, it was just a little bit later for me. I would still definitely ask yourself if you weren't as motivated by it before, are you in a good headspace that you actually want to play? And then at what level do you want to play? So I think you need to ask yourselves the hard questions as a senior. That's not a negative. It's just, for someone who wasn't who wasn't that interested in the recruiting process or it doesn't excite you, I just ask yourself, hey, am I really willing to put in 20 hours a week? And Tyra will tell you it's more than 20 hours a week for Division One. Am I really willing and wanting to do that? And it's okay to say no. That's okay that that's not your thing. But just asking yourself those questions because you want to know where to start your recruiting process at, right? You want to know what level of what type of school, what area, big of sizing you want. You got to ask yourself those hard questions of, do I want a big school, small school, my major? How far away from home do I want to be? Um, the school factor first, compile your list, and then send out your emails versus just sending emails and seeing what's going to catch. But I would always have, like I said, like the recruiting video is huge. I would really encourage every single recruiting video to be videoed from the end line and at like net height. Okay. A lot of times I get videos from the sidelines, which is very common in high school for them to be recording like from the side of the net. That angle is really hard for me to see your speed. It's really hard for me to see how high you're getting. It's also like hard if I'm recruiting DSs, it's hard for me to see what you're seeing. Like, are you reading well? Because I can't see how the block's set up. Same with setters, like I can't, it's harder for me to see, like, are you reading the block on the other side? Like, what's your distribution? What's your tempo from that angle? So, as much video as you can get from the end line, net height is what we're really looking for that helps us make decisions.
So are you looking for 2 to 3 minutes, 5, 7, more than 10 minutes? What's
No, no more than
ideal?
10. Although my recruiting video was like 20. It's terrible. It's terrible. I peppered for like 5 minutes. But see, anything can happen. You can
Yep.
still get recruited even with a bad recruiting video, guys. It's okay. But I would say like you gotta remember like your first video is really about like how am I getting their attention? So don't start off with serving. A lot of Europeans do that. They send like 2 minutes worth of serving clips. I don't need serving. I'm not recruiting you off of serving. That's like a bonus. Um, I would say like 5 to 6 minutes, and I would make sure that you're starting off with like if you're an outside, like you're starting off with great in-system swings. I want to see out-of-system swings. I want to see you out-of-system set. I will say as a whole before I go anywhere, because this is something we just talked about. Um, I think one of the things that kind of in the past 10 years that has evolved in a negative way in club and high school is that people try and specialize their positions almost so much that they then don't have the skill set to do other things. Every day we do a ball control series. It's called the drill. And everyone has to set, everyone has to pass, everyone has to dig. You have to do everything. And I just think that's one thing that has really hurt kids when they get to college is like the whole IQ of the game because they've just been put in this
Right.
small little box for so long. So making sure that we see that you can play the game as a whole and that you're not just one dimensional. Um, if you're a right side hitter, I don't want to see you only on the right side. Okay, I need to see you also hit on the pin. I need to see your block moves. I need to see off blocker plays, you know, dig transition plays or block transition. I need to see your transition speed. So it's not just you're hitting highlights. Okay, that's going to get my attention. But in order for me to feel good about like, maybe saying, yeah, yes, this kid definitively helps us. She's a priority kid. She's one of my first two people I'm going to go see at this tournament. I need to see the game as a whole, right? And not long clips of it, but like dig transition, pass to attack, serve receive, out of system setting, all those things.
I won't
You
come
can
back
see
to
it discerning though.
specializing, but I do have a question about the video. Is there something that you've seen in highlight videos that's like a deal breaker for you, or like just a complete turnoff, or something that's a super positive in a video that you've seen?
Yeah. Oh, this isn't a deal breaker. It's just really hard. A lot of times, some of the recruiting services do this. They'll do this. You guys have seen these too in these videos where it's like a slow motion. I'm like, I can't see what you're doing. Like it's so slow motion that I lost you there. Or like right before it's about to go, you pause, like the person pauses in midair and there's like this fire emoji and
Yeah.
then they swing. Like we don't you don't need to do all that to catch someone's attention. Like it might look cool to you in making it, but we don't need the extra stuff. It's like the simple the better, to be honest.
Okay.
Um, like I said, just don't start off with serving. My attention will be hard to focus on that for so long. I think the angle, like I said, is really important, like making sure you're actually recording it the right way. But I also I don't think you need to like people need to overstress about it. There's no real deal breakers, I would say, in my opinion. It's just more of um putting the things that you want us to see.
Going back to you talking about specializing, we had a question. A girl said she plays multiple positions between school and club. I think maybe she's a hitter at club and setter at school, I think. And she just wants to know should she start specializing in one position? And if not, then how should she handle that?
There's a balance, okay? There's a balance in the fact it's so we just had a conversation we had just had to have a conversation about this a couple weeks ago with a player who was really interested in coming to Charlotte and she was a middle, a setter. She was a middle and a setter and a DS.
Wow.
Wasn't really understanding what that meant. And so there's a fine line between you have to be able to play the game as a whole because it helps your IQ wise. So, like, as a libero, I need to understand how to put a hitter in a better position. Okay. I can't just put up a ball and be like, go hit it. I need to have the IQ and the understanding of, okay, how do I better this ball for them? Or hitters, I need to be able to play defense as well because that helps me get on the court and play more playing time. Um, I will say at a certain level, though, again, this also depends on what level you want to play at. You can't be jack of all trades, master of none. Okay. So if you are just good at one thing and good at something else, is that going to get you on the court to beat out someone else in that position? Some places it might, some places it won't. And for, the player that we had talked about, she again was a great athlete. Um, she was a great athlete, but when we looked at her and we looked at each position and who we had committed, she wasn't going to beat out anyone in those positions because she didn't specialize enough. Like we're like, okay, you need to make it, and especially because the setter and the middle are just
Yeah.
completely different spectrums. But um, there also comes a thing of like you need to be able to say like, hey, I can do X, Y, and Z. I've done it before, but this is what I'm really focused on, and I'm gonna be is the best I can in this, while also being able to step in and be a great team player if I had to do this other position.
We we had a question from a player. She said this kind of goes with your underdog thing, I think. she wants to know what advice you would give to a player that's short. And I believe this person is a setter, but just in general, what would you say?
I'd say it's about your heart and about how competitive you are. Um, I had a player who, did you guys know the club Kiva out of
Mhm.
Louisville? Okay, so her name is Taylor Isert, and I'll brag on her because I love this kid so much. Taylor was a 5'7" setter and was recruited by a couple different big time ACC programs as either a walk-on or a 2-year scholarship, 2-year walk-on kid. Okay. And not that those aren't great options, they are. But when I went to watch her, like there was just something in her that I was like, this kid knows how to win. She thinks through the game at a whole different level. And she, exactly kind of what I said, she hated to lose more than she liked to win. And especially in the setter role, I was like, you have to have it. And the reason why they were going to offer her 2-2 was because they wanted her to run a 6-2. They didn't want her to run a 5-1. And I remember we committed her and she came in for her first college game and everyone was like, why did you get a setter so small? Like, and she's running a 5-1, like, oh, we'll just hit over her. This kid knew how to block touch. Like she, again, because she wanted to be great, she wanted to be the best. She's like, I'm gonna figure out a way to learn how to block my way that I'm gonna get touches. She didn't have to stuff block. She needed to get touches. And that's what she did. She slowed down the ball all the time and she learned how to score offensively in her own way. Taylor went on to be, she set 3 different records at her school. And she led at the time, our offense was the 6th best in the nation by her setting. She ran a 5-1 for all her 4 years of her career. She was a starting setter for us. And then her 5th year, she wanted to go to dental school, which we did not have. And so she transferred to UNC, and they hadn't been to the tournament in a little bit. And this past year, they made it back in. They were, top 25, and she was a starting setter for them. So,
What was her last name? Because what you're describing is like a setter that we have on our high school team, and I'd like for her to watch videos of her. What was her last name?
yeah, her name is Taylor Isert, Eisert. She's super fiery. She's probably the craziest one on the court, but she's the most competitive one on the court. And yeah, and as a fellow short person, I'd say don't let anyone ever tell you you can't do it. Find a way.
Uh, let's see. Just a couple more, and we'll let you go. How often do you check recruit social media accounts, and what are you looking for?
Ooh, I'm a lot. I do it a lot.
Why?
Here's why, honestly, 2 ways. One, I want them to engage with our program. And I also want to know them for them. So, when you come to Charlotte, it's not just about who you are as an athlete. It's not. In order for us to coach you the best to be your best on the court, we have to know what makes you tick and, how to get in your headspace and how to get you, if you're having a rough day, how do I pull the best out of you? Um, Not every kid is coached the same, as you guys know. We coach kids fairly, but we don't always coach them equally. And that doesn't mean that you have favorites. It's that there are some kids that you got to get in their butt and they respond that way. They respond much better that way. And then you have other kids that if you told them that their shoe was untied, they might be like, oh my gosh. So the personalize these relationships, like that's really important for me. So like, especially in the recruiting world, like I follow kids a lot. I like to know their interests. I like to know like if they're close with their family. I like to know what other hobbies they like to do. But I also want them to know us. I personally don't mind recruits following my personal page. I encourage it. Um, I think I'm quite hilarious, but they can figure that out for themselves. But we also have our own like recruiting page for Instagram, and that's a lot of like I want I want the players, I want these recruits to see what we're about because we want players that want to be at Charlotte. We don't want to have to convince people. Um, it's a lose-lose when coaches do that, when coaches try and put on like a facade or make things look, I don't know, like lie or fib about things. Um, it only hurts them in the wrong on the long run
Mhm.
because once they get here and they're not happy, then they're going to leave. So I think it's all about like knowing who we are from the get-go, and so and vice versa. Like when we recruit kids, we're hoping for it to be 4 years. That's our opinion. Now there are other coaching staffs out there that aren't as personal anymore. It's a lot more business model. But for us, like we really want to know you and we want you to know us. And so I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, probably more than most. Not in a creepy way, just what we believe in.
Okay. I, this is kind of a different question, but do you see some kids that I don't know in the process they'll make statements like I don't want to go more than an hour away. I want to do this certain major that is kind of like not a little bit specific, and so then they have like a really narrow uh, school choices. Like I, I mean, just maybe speak to how like well, first of all, what's your thoughts on that, and maybe maybe increasing your you know boundaries, so to speak.
Yeah. Um, I wouldn't be where I'm at if I didn't open myself up to opportunities. Like I said, I'm a small town PA girl. I'm the first one in my family to get out of the state, to explore something different. I definitely wouldn't be coaching if I didn't open myself up to different opportunities and see what was out there and make the connections that I did. Um, College athletics is hard in that a lot of kids want to stay close to home because they want to see their families, and that's valid. Um, but I also think sometimes we put a little too much into that and we think like, oh, I'm going to see my family every weekend. You're not.
Mhm.
You're not. Even if you're 15 minutes down the road, and I don't care what level you're at, they might come to more games. But again, NAIA, JUCO, D3, doesn't matter what level. College athletics is going to take up a lot of your time that you're invested in it. And so I just think sometimes people say that and then they realize, like, oh, I'm not even home that much anyway.
Right.
And I would just say there's so much more out there than what people realize. Again, I thought I wanted a Big Ten school. It's what I grew up knowing. And then I went to a Division I school that had 4,000 people in Jacksonville, Florida. Never been there a day in my life. And it just was the best experience for me. And I think a lot of people will tell you that. I would encourage everyone to just to go outside your boundaries a lot more than what we like to do. I think as humans, it's natural. We want to be safe. We want to be in our comfort zone.
Yeah.
College is a college is a safe time to go outside your boundaries and outside your comfort zone and experiencing a different place or being around different people because then after 4 years you get to go back home if you want
Hmm.
and then be back in your comfort zone. But college is the time to go maybe a different part of the country or maybe go to a different place that, you know, people are a little bit different or think differently than you. And I think that's really healthy. And I think that there's a lot more opportunity in schools by just being open to at least having conversation. I think if a school's interested in you and they fit some things, like you're like, hey, like these have three of my boxes in schools that I'm interested in, like take the call.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I will say that I tell people all the time is that the people make the place. You could be at your dream school. You could be at the best place ever. I don't know, let's say you want to go to a beach school. You could be at a beach school. But if you don't like your teammates, you don't like your coaches, and it's hard every day, you're going to be miserable. You have to like the school. I'm not saying don't, I'm not saying only go for the volleyball purposes, but um, people make the place. And so that's why I think it's really important to always let people give you a chance to get to know them and vice versa because um like I said, like I was really fortunate and I ended up at a place where I never thought I would, and it's led me to now being an associate head coach with one of my best friends and
Exactly.
building something back up. So
Well, I appreciate it. That's all I got. Ladies, y'all got anything before we wrap it up? Anything y'all want to add? You good? Okay.
Sophie, did you play at Clemson?
I did, yeah. And I'm actually from
I knew
Pennsylvania.
it.
I was gonna tell you. I'm from Pittsburgh.
My dad's from Pittsburgh. Well, everyone says they're from Pitt,
Yeah,
but my
yeah,
dad is actually
everyone.
from Pittsburgh, as they say.
Yeah, I'm
That's
from like
awesome.
north of the city, but yeah. So
What
I
high
played at
school did you go
Clemson.
to?
I went to North Allegheny.
I was, was Heidi Miller your coach?
Yeah.
I went to Cumberland Valley. And
Okay,
so
yeah.
Heidi and my mom was the high school coach for forever.
Yeah.
Everyone knows her. She's way more popular than I am. Um, Heidi and my mom are very close because they always
Oh,
ran
she's
tournaments together.
awesome. Love
Yeah,
her.
good
I play with
person.
her two daughters, Abby and Paige.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah,
Small
so
world.
excited.
See?
Yeah. And
Volleyball
then
world,
did
small
you
world,
play
man.
with Taylor Unruh at Florida?
I
I feel
knew
like she
Taylor
was in and
Unruh.
out. Yeah.
I'm a little older.
Oh shoot.
Um, I'm 31, almost 32, even
She's
though I
like
probably
20, like
I
25.
look like I'm too young, but yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. No,
Yeah.
I would just say the biggest thing for my girls, Tyra and I are coaching the 17s, and I think a lot of them are kind of figuring out a little bit late that like, hey, this is something like I can really do. And they're in the process of like, hey, let me start emailing coaches and like getting into the
Hmm.
feel of things. So I think just like the advice is just like how much should they be emailing? And then like I thought like the biggest thing for me was like as soon as you can stop emailing a coach and like be like texting and like calling on the phone, like I just feel like it's more personal that way. But what's your thought?
100%. 100%. And I also think it shows that you're interested more. Like, I don't know. Texting is easier, one. Like, get out your phone and just shoot a text. But I think you hit it on the head. Like, it's just personalized. And I want people, like, I want to know that this kid is genuinely interested in us, not like sending out a mass email of here's my updated highlights. Like, yeah, that's important. I need to continue to watch. But like, anytime I can text you, and also like, I want to talk more than just volleyball. Like, I want to know, did you win your award? You know, I had a player who was in, this was kind of funny, who was in a musical. And I was like, okay, how's your song going? And she recorded herself singing for like 20 seconds. And I thought that was like amazing though, because I'm like, those are the things that's going to get me to know how you function. And so you really develop that, like, the personality can kind of come out a little bit more in text, you know? And
Yeah.
that's what I want to see. But I think, yeah, and I think it just shows that you care more, that you took the time to text them instead of an email.
Yeah. And then when I guess like girls are calling you on the phone, like what's like top questions to ask? Like for them to ask you or like to
Oh,
be
I
ready to
think just
answer. Like, you
questions in
know,
general, to be
yeah.
honest with you, like, I think that's probably one of my biggest pet peeves is like we both take the time, both of us, because it's a two-way street. We both took the time out, but did you do your homework on the school? Okay. Don't ask questions that are just the most easily Googleable, if that's a word,
Yeah.
thing. Like that means that you did not even look up our school. So that's kind of a red flag for me sometimes if I'm like, I don't really think they're interested in us because they didn't even look. Um, look if before you get on the phone, look if they have your major. Because if we don't have what you want, then that's a waste of both of our times. And also, again, shows me you didn't do your homework. Um, I like when kids ask about like coaching styles. I like when kids ask about the personality of the team, what the girls do for like majors. Like when I get questions about what our girls do, it always makes me happy. One, because I love to talk about our kids because they're awesome. And two, because that means that you're showing that you want to be a part of that culture. So, um, that's a big one. And sometimes I think it's okay to ask hard questions like, hey, where do I fall on your list? Like, love that. There are some coaches that like are like weird about that. I'm like, no, like be direct because I'll be direct as well. Because honesty is the best. If I can't be honest with you on our first phone call about certain things, or if a kid feels like that they're not getting a direct answer from a coach, that should be a red flag for the kid. Um, that's just my personal thought on that. But I
Yeah.
think just having questions in general is always a plus. Um, or maybe even like, why did you get into coaching? That's kind of nice to ask like the coach a personal question because then you get to know like their why. Like, what are they in this for? when the days are hard, why do they still push through it?
Yeah. Yeah. And then I don't know, one other question that I just had off the top of my head is like I think the biggest thing for me when like deciding like where to commit, like whatever, was like how much say do you put into like the coach?
Like to make the decision of where to go?
Yeah, of like where to go. Like at the end of the day, like, hey, I'm between these two schools, like
Mhm.
how much do you put into the coach of it? The coaching and the girls, like
So personally, that was everything to me. I think it's also a valid question to ask how many like years they're planning to stay or what their coaching contract is. I think a lot of kids get burned by that because coaches aren't honest and like, hey, this is the last year of my contract, and maybe the year before they went like 5-20. Um, that's like a very like that's an okay question to ask. Maybe not on the first phone call, maybe on the second or third, but still, I think it's a good question to ask because if you are invested in that person, you want to know that they're going to be there. So, ooh, excuse me. Um, but like I said, like the people make the place. And like here's a great example for us. Like we're in this weird phase of I like Tyra, you were here during like the prime of Charlotte.
Yeah.
Like, but as an alumni, I think we can be honest, in the last like 2 to 3 years, it's been a little harder to probably see for you.
Yeah.
Um, I don't like to talk about the last 2 years because it's not a great like when if you just look at our schedule, it's like five and something, two conference wins. So when I go to what I'm about to say, Sophie is like the coach, like when you look at our staff though, and not just the school or the previous, like it's important to know, like, we've all won conference championships. We've put over 20 kids to play professionally. Benavia has had individual success as a player. I've had individual success as a player. Like, what has that coach done? What is their resume, especially for a new staff? So we can't just always go off of straight up like what has the last 2 years, 3 years looked like. I think it's good to know. I'm not saying avoid it. Because that's another good question of like, what are your plans, how to change a program? What is your blueprint into getting this back to, a top three program here in the conference? But like I said, again, you can be the best school. You could be at a school that's like 19, 20 wins and still be miserable because you're not around the right people for you. So that's been my
yeah.
thought from day one.
I remember too, like when I was navigating through the process, I remember asking, where do you see me contributing?
Hmm.
And that was important to me because, you never know when, your last game's going to be. I only
Hmm.
got to play my freshman year and I did everything I wanted to accomplish within that year. So that's something
Right.
to consider too. Like when you're thinking about programs and coaching and understanding the contract, if they only have a 2-year contract and they don't see you contributing within that time, you may want to consider that as well.
Exactly. I think another good question, this is so bad. I think other college coaches would hate me if they heard me say this. I think one way to genuinely kind of check to see if coaches are really actually into you or just taking a call is like, hey, what's some feedback that you've seen me play? Like what can what are some things I can work on or what are some things that you've seen in my play that either fit your system or things I can work on? And it will be funny to you that some of that, like some of these coaches will straight like not have answers. They'll kind of like talk around a little bit and then you kind of know like, okay, like that kind of tells me where I'm at on the list. Or they'll be able to rattle it off and you're like, oh shoot, yeah, they've paid a lot of attention to me. Like this is a good sign. So yeah, other coaches would probably hate me for that, but put you on the spot a little bit, but it's okay.
Yeah. And I kind of feel like the calls and the coaches that like want you at the end of the day are like the calls that feel like a conversation. Like it feels like they're interviewing you and like there's like bargaining questions out to you. Like it's just not as like personal and like you just have to make sure like, hey, like what do I want out of this here?
100%.
Yeah. Like if
Or
it's
also just
flowing,
being
like
able to
you know
talk
it's
about it
kind
normally.
of yeah.
I talked the other day for a kid, a local North Carolina kid for 20 minutes about her prom dress. And then I had a moment, I was like, this is what I chose to do with for my life. Let's talk to 16-year-olds about their prom dresses. But
Yeah.
it's like that's what I love about my job is like that's the kind of stuff that I don't know. Those are the things that carry on with you, and that's why, I'm still in conversations with some of my players that are overseas, and they call me and talk to me about not even volleyball related things, but just life and like that's why you're in this job.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody
Awesome.
got anything else or?
Okay, so I have a
Oh,
question. Just as a head coach, I know when you were talking about the apps, like we're on FieldLevel, that is one thing that we're on,
Mhm.
and I have filled out a lot of the player evaluations that only coaches can see, like the players can't see. So my question is, are those actually useful, or am I kind of like, I mean, they take a long time, so if like no one's really paying attention to them, you know,
It's hit or, that's a hard one. I think it's fair. I know a lot of programs that like really work with FieldLevel, and I think FieldLevel's done a really good job of like kind of leveling up FieldLevel, not to use that same word, but they've done a really good job of evolving, I guess is a better word, to like make sure that it's actually like helpful for us. So I wouldn't say it's definitely helpful. I do think if the kid, I stand by this no matter what someone's using is like if there are two schools that are their top two and they're not hearing back from them and you genuinely think they could play there. Like it's not just, them reaching. Um I do think it goes a long way for you to email on their behalf because it shows that you went out of your way to vouch for this kid. And I also think, speaking of reach schools, because I know you guys are busy too, but when people are like putting together a list, I think it's really important to have like 5 reach schools, 10 schools that you think are like a good level, like this is a good fit for you, and then maybe like some backup schools. Because the other thing with reach schools and how the transfer portal is going, these roster cuts, kids leaving, like kids stopping volleyball, which is sad, but it happens. Like your reach school could need a position open like that, and they have your information. Like I have folders listed of people that, hey, like they're not quite what we need right now, but I have a list of kids that in case we need something, I know they're interested in Charlotte. Here we go. So I think it's really like those are important. Don't just, have kind of levels to things of where they're putting their focus in.
thank you.
All right. Sophie's on a walk, it looks like.
Sorry, I gotta get into the gym before the coach gets mad at me. But are we good to cut here? I was gonna ask you about
You mean stop recording?
yeah.
Yeah, I can stop.